British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Colombia River Treaty, saying the current administration is reviewing its international engagements.
The deadly and devastating wildfires in Los Angeles are drawing new attention to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's comments about one of Canada's most valued natural resources.
You have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
Something fundamental is shifting across North America, not through war or economic collapse, but through the most elemental force that has shaped human civilization: water. As rivers run thinner and drought cracks once fertile soil, two nations that spent generations as partners now confront a question that tests the very meaning of sovereignty and survival. British Columbia confirms what many feared. Washington has suspended talks on the Columbia River Treaty. The current administration is reassessing all international commitments. Meanwhile, deadly wildfires tearing through Los Angeles have amplified President Donald Trump's remarks about Canada's most precious resource. They have millions of gallons pouring down from the north, he said, describing Canadian water reserves as essentially a very large faucet. The statement landed like a stone in still water, its ripples spreading outward. Trump's words reflected a stark American reality. Arizona, Nevada, and California are descending deeper into crisis. The Colorado River no longer sustains the demands placed upon it. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, once symbols of southwestern abundance, have plummeted to historic lows. White mineral rings mark their retreat. Boat ramps end in dust. Cities have entered permanent conservation mode. Agriculture buckles under the pressure. Farmers abandon fields. Groundwater aquifers sink toward depletion. Billions spent on desalination plants and recycling systems still cannot bridge the gap between supply and demand. The future narrows with each passing year. To Trump and many Americans, the solution seems obvious. Canada holds nearly 1/5 of Earth's freshwater. Vast lakes like inland seas, rivers stretching thousands of miles from glacial peaks, wetlands supporting ancient ecosystems. If Canada possesses surplus while America faces emergency, why not cooperate? Water sharing could strengthen continental ties, stabilize vulnerable regions, and generate revenue for both nations. Canada's answer arrived with unmistakable clarity. No. Prime Minister Mark Carney reinforced the position with measured firmness. Canadian freshwater will remain within Canadian borders. This is not negotiable. Water, Carney explained, forms part of Canada's national identity, its ecosystem, its cultural foundation. It is a public trust, not a commodity. The moment it enters international markets, Canada loses control over its use. His refusal stems not from hostility, but from hard-learned lessons. Large economies shape global markets in ways smaller nations cannot counter. Even well-intentioned agreements evolve over time, shifting the balance of power. Canadians remember watching natural resources fall under foreign corporate control elsewhere in the world. They refuse to repeat that pattern with their water. For Canadians, exporting fresh water feels like surrendering a piece of the nation's soul. It signals loss of authority over something that should never answer to foreign influence. Once water crosses borders as a product, it becomes subject to trade deals, corporate claims, and international regulations that override domestic decisions. That possibility alarms a country that values its independence. Carney's stance rests on principle, not emotion. He argues that water exists as a core element of sovereignty itself. A nation controlling its water controls its future. Surrender it, and you risk losing both. The ecological stakes amplify the concern. Large-scale water diversion would devastate entire natural systems. Rivers feeding forests, wetlands, and lakes sustain vast networks of wildlife. Indigenous communities depend on these ecosystems for their cultures and livelihoods. Removing significant water volumes would trigger irreversible damage, rippling through agriculture, tourism, and fisheries. Once disrupted, river systems rarely recover. The consequences would burden future generations long after any economic benefits vanish. Carney's warning extends beyond Canada. As water scarcity accelerates globally, commodifying water will deepen the divide between wealthy and poor nations. Rich countries will purchase security while others face inescapable crises. Access to clean water could transform from a fundamental right into a privilege, reshaping global stability in unpredictable ways. American proponents of water trade dismiss these concerns as overblown. They emphasize practicality. Millions need water, and pipelines offer solutions. Infrastructure planners have drafted designs for continental pipelines resembling oil transport networks, complete with pumping stations and distribution hubs. Supporters describe this as cooperative supply management, a symbol of engineering achievement and cross-border unity. But Canadians hear something darker in these proposals. The beginning of dependency. Water isn't oil or natural gas. It's woven into the land itself, inseparable from culture and identity. Once large-scale exports begin, stopping them becomes nearly impossible. Canada would face diplomatic backlash, trade penalties, and international arbitration. That risk feels too great. At the dispute's heart lie two incompatible philosophies. One views water as a tool for economic development and problem-solving. The other sees it as heritage that demands protection with long-term responsibility. Both emerge from genuine urgency. Both recognize that climate change is reshaping continents. Yet their responses reflect profoundly different visions of what nations owe their people and planet. The American West demonstrates the cost of delayed action. Regions once thriving on abundance now live with constant tension. Power generation drops as reservoirs sink. Communities built on predictable weather face hotter temperatures, reduced rainfall, and intensifying droughts. Each year widens the gap between supply and demand, making solutions more complex and elusive. For Carney, the implications are clear. A nation cannot surrender what sustains its people without endangering its identity. Trading water freely would shift internal power dynamics and invite external influence over domestic policy. Within a generation, export arrangements could strip Canada of authority to manage its own resources. Future leaders would inherit obligations they never created. Foreign markets would develop expectations Canada couldn't reverse without severe consequences. The United States confronts its own difficult truth. Its population continues growing. Its agriculture remains globally vital. Its desert cities show no signs of contracting. As water grows scarcer, America must balance national interest against international diplomacy. Canada must protect its wealth without isolation. That balance will define both nations for decades to come. The question is no longer whether water scarcity will reshape North America. The question is whether two neighbors can navigate that transformation without fracturing the partnership that has sustained them for generations. The answer will determine far more than access to a resource. It will determine what sovereignty means in an age of scarcity.
The federal government is hitting back at two big automakers. Ottawa calling it unacceptable that Stellantis and General Motors are both scaling back manufacturing in Canada, breaching its commitment. Ottawa is now trying to put pressure on them to back down by limiting the number of vehicles they can bring in from the U.S. tariff-free.
1,200 families, one factory town of 14,000 people, billions in taxpayer money, and a company that thought it could just walk away. What happened next didn't just shock General Motors, it sent every major corporation in North America scrambling to recalculate their entire Canadian strategy. Because when GM announced the permanent closure of the CAMI plant in Ingersoll, Ontario, they had no idea Canada had been preparing for exactly this moment. And the price GM is paying right now is far steeper than anyone in Detroit ever imagined. In 2022, GM made a promise. Ontario and Ottawa poured billions, yes billions, into modernizing the Ingersoll plant for electric vehicle production. BrightDrop was marketed as revolutionary, a long-term job creator, a cornerstone of the automotive future. GM accepted every dollar of that support. But April 2, 2025 arrived, and the company suddenly suspended production, citing weak demand, claiming operations would restart in May at reduced scale. Workers trusted them. They stayed, hoping this was just a temporary setback. Maybe things would recover, they thought. But they never did. By May, the production line had completely stopped. More than 1,200 workers were let go. The union fought to keep spirits up. Lana Payne, Unifor's national president, said exactly what workers were feeling, that they had stood by the company through every high and low, that they were committed and invested in this plant. Then July passed, August passed, September passed, and still nothing. Detroit remained completely silent. Only uncertainty filled the air. Savings ran out. Benefits became questionable. Families began asking whether this facility was even meant to be an EV hub at all. Remember, this was Canada's first large-scale electric vehicle plant, expected to play a critical role in the clean energy strategy, lead the EV market, and help shape North America's auto sector. And yet, General Motors took the support and disappeared. So what happened next? Ottawa didn't panic. They observed, analyzed, and prepared. And when GM announced permanent closure on October 21st, Melanie Joly was ready to strike. Just 72 hours later, the federal government forced GM's executives into emergency mode. Ottawa slashed nearly 25% of GM's duty-free import quota. Every U.S.-made GM vehicle destined for the Canadian market instantly faced a retaliatory tariff of 25% overnight. Stellantis was hit even harder, their duty-free export privileges cut by up to 50% after shifting Jeep production to Illinois. This wasn't impulsive retaliation, this was deliberate, calculated, strategic. Canada was sending a clear message. You didn't honor your commitments, now face the consequences. Here's where things get fascinating. Earlier this year, Canada established the Auto Diminution Framework. The name sounds technical, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. Under this framework, vehicles built in the United States and imported into Canada face a 25% tariff. But if you're a manufacturer with active production in Canada, creating Canadian jobs and honoring investment commitments, you're exempt. It's a blend of incentive and discipline. The message is simple. Keep your promise, invest seriously, create jobs here, and Canada stands with you. Break your commitments. Your privileges disappear.